Is disclosure upon us? Are we alone in this vast and seemingly infinite universe? Is one of the most profound questions set to be maybe revealed in 2018. Disclosure simply means truth. It means finally admitting that humanity is not merely a lone intelligence in the universe. There appears to be a multitude of signals that point towards potentially the mainstream, gradually acclimatizing people to the reality of the universe and who we are as sentient beings. Dr. Stephen Greer, one of the main commentators on this subject, in his film Unacknowledged, Greer states that there is more evidence for extraterrestrial life than pharmaceutical drugs and many of humanity's mainstream scientific theories. Mainstream never really subjectively covers this area of research. As an individual, if you search out various books, researchers, scholars, and films, the evidence is profound and overwhelming. Mainstream suffers from an inability to join the dots. Events and timings are framed as coincidental and unconnected. If people attempt to marry up connected events, their theories are simply smeared as conspiracy. The truth is, everything is connected. Understanding can be sought through analysis, which is why extraterrestrials, covert hidden technologies, and science needs to be viewed through the lens of current world affairs. Considering geopolitics, the cabal, deep state, Donald Trump, digital insiders such as MegaAnon, QAnon, and WikiLeaks is vital to understand why disclosure is occurring now. It's not as simple that this is new evidence, because the evidence has always been there. Is disclosure being dragged kicking and screaming into the light because of these events and the loss of power over secrecy by the deep state? Or is disclosure being rolled out because of a huge alleged crackdown on covert forces? Is it tooled as a weapon of distraction to deflect attention away from these covert groups and create new threats for increased military spending? Dr. Michael Salla. Academic Dr. Michael Salla, a pioneer in the subject of exopolitics, examines the covert world and its interaction with mainstream geopolitics and the extraterrestrial subject. One of his recent articles, Trump Executive Order Targets Deep State and Opens Door to Full Disclosure, explores Trump's rise to the US presidency and the US military's help with his ascendancy to power, and the preceding fight against the deep state, targeting members of the US political sphere and security agencies, such as the CIA, who annually amass huge black budgets from drugs, arms, and even people and child trafficking. The CIA and elements of the deep state may have covertly been brought to their knees, if not seriously impeded, with sealed indictments, targeting bank accounts and their financial infrastructure, along with dramatically sending US Marines in Osprey helicopters to hover over the CIA headquarters in Langley as a show of force. The deep state's unfettered control could be one of the reasons why disclosure and access to free zero-point energy, anti-gravity propulsion, holographic healing, and reverse aging technologies have until now been suppressed. Salla adds a note of caution concerning the military's involvement, with these disclosures occurring through a militaristic mindset, directly promoting US national security interests, rather than the wider good of humanity and other nations. Could this be a future cause for concern? 2017. 2017 has been a seminal year for disclosures and UFO activity in general, both on Earth and in space. We are predicting this activity and the gravity of the information is set to increase during 2018. Towards the tail end of 2018, is it possible the world could be a very different place? The following have been the most significant stories to have occurred over the last few years. NASA. With NASA, it feels there is a rapid continuing urgency to their disclosures, with 72 newly discovered galaxies, with an estimated 57.6 trillion worlds. Even by the law of averages, the odds on merely the possibility of intelligent life is undeniable. Alien megastructure. Since 2015, Tabby's star, positioned 1,500 light-years away from Earth, has been viewed with intense interest. Due to the bizarre long-term dimming of its light, astronomers have seriously considered that the star is surrounded by some kind of intelligent megastructure, with speculation it potentially could be functioning to harness the star's energy. Alien radio bursts. Powerful radio bursts from distant space, FRBs, or fast radio bursts, have been recorded lasting only a few milliseconds. Some theorize its source could simply originate from black holes, or more interestingly, extraterrestrial intelligence. The Breakthrough Listening Project, involving Stephen Hawking, has found up to 15 pulsars this year alone. International Space Station bacteria. In November 2017, it was reported a Russian cosmonaut on a spacewalk outside the International Space Station collected swabs from the exterior hull of the station. After analysis, harmless bacteria was discovered. Scientists have claimed its origins were highly likely to have come from outer space. Mars tube-like structures. At the beginning of 2018, it has been revealed the Mars Curiosity rover may have found traces of fossilized life. The proposed Martian fossils are long and tube-like, with speculation by some academics that they look incredibly similar to fossils found on Earth. Oumuamua. A recently discovered cigar-shaped alleged asteroid, Oumuamua, has had widespread global coverage. It's unique firstly because of its shape, especially in light of many historical sightings of cigar-shaped craft, but secondly, it being the first known and recorded interstellar object to have entered our solar system. It's currently travelling at 200,000 miles an hour in the direction of Pluto. Scientists, including Stephen Hawking, have speculated that it could be an alien spacecraft, although the widely held popular view is that it's simply an asteroid with an icy core. The outer skin of Oumuamua is made up of an organic material, but scientists are unable to verify the core of the alleged asteroid. The composition of this object is interesting, especially in the light of David Adair and his experiences with covert projects. David, from an early age, was a highly talented rocket engineer. He was taken to Area 51 to help analyse a recovered UFO's propulsion system. He discovered that the craft was composed of the surrounding exoskeleton with an organic skin covering. David speculates the craft was possibly a living entity. He further described how the occupants could physically and mentally meld with the craft. So with wild speculation, is Oumuamua constituted from similar technology? The New York Times Pentagon UFO Task Force. Around mid-December 2017, the New York Times ran a story disclosing the Pentagon had an investigation task force running from 2007 to 2012 with an annual budget of $22 million to investigate UFOs. The unit was started by Harry Reid, a now retired Democratic Senator of Nevada. The program was headed up by Luis Alexandro, a military intelligence officer who is also now aligned to Tom DeLonge and his To the Stars Academy. Whether the program was disbanded or is currently still operating covertly is not completely understood. The following quote was featured in a UK newspaper, The Guardian. Nick Pope, who used to run the British government's UFO program, said, "The take-home message here is that there's probably something out there, but we don't know what it is. It's an extraordinary revelation, not least because it directly contradicts that many specific denials that the US government has issued previously when asked about this subject and their involvement in it. It precisely reflects my own experience of this intriguing but frustrating subject with the British government. Like our US colleagues, we too denied, even to Parliament, that we were undertaking secret studies into the UFO phenomenon, and constantly downplaying the true extent of our interest and activity at the Ministry of Defence." The New York Times Air Force UFO footage. Mid-December 2017, more military-based disclosures were reported, firstly, in the New York Times. Two very compelling videos were sourced and released by Louis Alexandro in conjunction with To the Stars Academy. Both footage was captured by airborne US fighter jets through their infrared gun cameras back in 2004. One video shows a tic-tac shaped craft. The second was encountered by two fighter jets from the USS Princeton, which previously had been tracking strange craft for up to 2 weeks. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slight were 100 miles into the Pacific Ocean when they encountered the saucer-shaped craft, which hurtled from 80,000 feet down to 20,000 feet above the sea, before shooting out of radar range at an incredible speed. This video has been widely discussed by the mainstream as potential proof, with the pilot being interviewed on US television. The strength of uptake by this story by the mainstream has been very pronounced and surprising, with Richard Dolan appearing on CBSN in the US to discuss the footage and other aspects of disclosures from 2017. Robert Bigelow. Billionaire aerospace entrepreneur Robert Bigelow was interviewed by 60 Minutes in the US. He was confronted by the interviewer if he believed in the possibilities of UFOs. He went on to confirm, "I am absolutely convinced that aliens exist, and the alien presence is right under people's noses. There is an alien intelligence interacting with Earth, the air, below the land, the water, and below the ice." It's been reported the majority of the $22 million used for the Pentagon UFO investigation task force was siphoned off to Bigelow Aerospace. Much of the covert world operates in the private sphere for reasons of secrecy, reduced public visibility, and lack of regulation. Robert Bigelow is potentially one of the largest private investors in UFO research. It's speculated he's even retrieved exotic ET materials. Interestingly, part of Bigelow's aerospace logo features a graphic representation of the head of a stereotypical grey alien. His organisation is a vital component to NASA's future space programs to the Moon and even Mars, with its unique inflatable craft technology. Bigelow and his organisation is deeply associated with the recent disclosures and should be closely watched for future activity. It's incredibly unique for a billionaire industrialist to be so honest about the ET question. To the Stars Academy. Tom DeLonge, a former member of US band Blink-182, heads up the organisation, with help from insiders sourced from within the military, security service, aerospace industry, and science. They intend to investigate, execute, and promote concepts in exotic propulsion, brain-to-computer interfacing, space-time theories, and the very nature of consciousness through engaging, entertaining media. Tom DeLonge and his colleagues talk very openly about experience and evidence for unidentified aerial threats. They even have plans to attempt to design and build their own experimental spacecraft, using donations from the public. Part of the process will include demonstrating dematerialization and anti-gravity science. This could possibly mean the discussion of the metal bismuth, which is already known about in the ufology community. Bismuth is considered to be the key element required for the science of dematerialization to function. To the Stars Academy has been widely tarred by certain members of the truth and ufology community as being a soft, controlled disclosure by covert forces. Although this organisation does appear to be an official disclosure of sorts, down to the press coverage and vague military backing, DeLonge has tweeted there is still existing resistance from certain groups to their activity. Evidence gathered and discussed from within the truth and ufology community by its scholars is generally ignored by mainstream outlets. Tom DeLonge's organisation, on the other hand, has had relatively favourable press coverage from around the world, which started at the very launch of the organisation with extensive reporting in the Huffington Post. The Disclosure Project. It's important to detail that organised disclosures have occurred before, the most famous being the Disclosure Project, headed up by Dr. Stephen Greer, a former emergency room doctor. The Disclosure Project is reported to have had up to 500 government, military, aerospace contractors, and intelligence community witnesses. This culminated with a select group of whistleblowers presenting their story at the National Press Club back in May 2001. The event covered witness stories, documents, photographs, and film, real hard evidence from highly credible, respected individuals. At the time, there was a muted media response to the event. The explosive disclosures quickly dissipated and were generally forgotten about in the mainstream. Reasons for secrecy. So historically, what have been the reasons for ongoing crippling secrecy? Technology and money. One viewpoint surrounds the suppression of technology to protect the economic model we are all beholden to. Some researchers and whistleblowers have stated that integrated circuits, night vision, Kevlar, and even Velcro, to name a few, are a result of seeded technologies of reversed engineered ET technology. It is understood extraterrestrial craft utilize systems that produce unlimited free clean energy by simply drawing energy from the ether. If such revolutionary technology was widely available across the globe, with every single household with an installed free energy device, it would crash the existing global economy. Covert military forces would lose their prevailing wealth and influence. History is littered with individuals such as Nikola Tesla who have perfected the beginnings of this technology, but immediate forceful intervention from covert power rapidly hid the devices from public view. It's entirely reasonable to consider that there was a certain amount of criminality in this secrecy and suppression. Sadly, this policy has been around for nearly 100 years and caused untold environmental damage to our fragile ecosystem and produced artificial scarcity, competition, and huge inequality and suffering. Hence why the powers that be are terrified a new open paradigm could be conceived, leading them to be exposed and accountable for the untold pain and suffering sustained by their lust for control, power, and wealth. Psychology. Certain elite groups harbour the arrogant view that humanity would psychologically have problems coping with the idea that extraterrestrials exist and that they are visiting Earth. In 1938, The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells was broadcast over the radio in the US as a series of fictitious news bulletins. The radio stunt caused widespread public panic and anxiety. This is generally cited as another factor why secrecy must be maintained, because of a fear of society may break down. This could explain why there is an increasing barrage of news stories reporting on potential life in the universe. To acclimatise and seed these concepts, preparing humanity for future realities. You can even analyse the psychology of the keepers or guards of this covert knowledge. Groups and individuals no doubt relish the feelings of superiority and dominance over the rest of humanity. This privileged position of power and control could be very hard for them to relinquish, especially in light of advanced technology. Spirituality. Delving deeper into the secrecy, certain forces may also wish to hold humanity on Earth, controlled, dumbed down, through materialism and division, keeping us all from the truth, from realising our future potential as an interstellar, loving species. A connected world. We live in an increasingly connected world. Secrecy is harder and harder to contain. The truth is becoming more widely known. Because of this, are now covert forces reluctantly allowing a controlled type of disclosure under their terms to mitigate culpability and continue to control the narrative. Over the last year, it does appear that this rollout has begun. Distraction. Is there potential for disclosure to be weaponized? Increasingly, people in the Western world are becoming more and more awake to the corruption and inbuilt inequality to the system, coupled with the realization that maybe mainstream media forces have been compromised, are now more purveyors of closed ideas and censorship, maintaining the status quo, rather than questioning the establishment. Could disclosure be used as a sleight of hand technique to draw people's attention away, to take the heat for the unfair reality of people's lives? In a recent email circulated by Dr. Stephen Greer, he wrote, quote, "Urgent. Note that the recent NY Times story is coached from a threat office of the Pentagon. This is a clear ramp up to false flag fake disclosure designed to prepare people for a threat from outer space, so the warmongers and war profiteers have a new, bigger enemy. Beware." End quote. This view originates from one of Greer's insiders from the Disclosure Project. Dr. Carol Rosen was an executive and space missile consultant and friend of Wernher von Braun. He was a Nazi scientist brought over to the US after World War II under Operation Paperclip, and worked in the US as an aerospace engineer and space architect. He warned Rosen on his deathbed that certain covert forces control humanity through manipulation and detailed planning through fear, to help facilitate ongoing increased military spending. He detailed the engineered threats in order as communism, terrorism, third world leaders, asteroids, with the final threat being alien in origin. Wernher von Braun predictions eerily tallies with historical and current events and should be heeded as a warning, especially in light of military disclosures which have rebranded the word UFO as unidentified aerial threats. It should be noted that Dr. Stephen Greer's view is that all ETs are inherently peaceful in nature. His view goes against the common view held by many other researchers. They report the universe has an inbuilt duality, with interacting dark and light interstellar forces. Kerry Cassidy, Project Camelot, footage hoax. Kerry Cassidy, on her YouTube channel Project Camelot, has interviewed hundreds of experiencers and insiders from in covert groups. During a very recent interview, she discussed how one of her close insiders, John Lear, a well-known former CIA pilot, gave his expert opinion on the material disclosed to the mainstream, namely the recent Air Force UFO footage. Lear describes how the footage and audio don't appear to match. He also highlights the way the pilots are talking to each other on film doesn't conform to standard processes and protocols usually expected by the Air Force. He's highly critical of the language, especially when discussing technical details of the weather. This leads him to believe the footage isn't what it seems. Lear flags the air ambient sounds within the pilot's cockpit aren't consistent with the reality of military jets, describing that microphones are positioned within the pilot's masks, so technically there should be no ambient sounds at all. Cassidy went on to add she perceives this as a quasi-military reveal, a disclosure of US technology, rather than it being ET in origin. The video is seeded as a warning to China and their secret space program, posturing the advanced level of sophistication that the US has attained in their space fleet. She states that this is the way countries communicate in the covert world. Linda Moulton Howe, a renowned investigator and journalist, broadcast on Phenomenon Radio. She recently, with researchers George Knapp, Grant Cameron, and Rendlesham Forest experiencer John Burroughs, covered the current mainstream disclosures. They spoke about how Tom DeLonge's profile is being used as a conduit for controlled disclosure, and how he is very much beholden to the timelines of his advisors and other people behind the scenes. The group discussed that people should be mindful that the waters of disclosure are purposely muddied, questioning people's motives, their backgrounds, damaging their credibility. George Knapp confirmed that the New York Times UFO footage represents a small drop in the ocean to a larger library of video evidence that is set to be released. Robert Bigelow, through his organisation, has been investigating deeply into this subject for the last 10 years. He controls the story and has amassed a huge wealth of evidence. The closure of the Pentagon UFO task force was instigated by various factions in the security services. As an example, a small elite group believe that researching UFOs is actually satanic. There are many other people who are terrified about the end of secrecy because of their own culpability, misappropriating funds into dark projects, and suppressing technologies that will heal and advance humanity. Grant Cameron stated he is very positive about the future, advising that this is the first step in changing the mass consciousness. It marks a small baby step to everyday people understanding the true reality of the universe. Be patient. Finally, the atmosphere is changing where it's credible to be able to discuss the subject in public without ridicule, especially in the news media. Towards the end of the show, they explored how Bigelow and his colleagues have an in-depth understanding of the consciousness aspect to ETs, UFOs, and linked exotic technologies. They speculated this may be the direction the narrative could be travelling towards, including disclosing the existence of an important interstellar portal, which is very near to our planet. This could be allegedly why Earth, the Moon, and Mars all share similar ancient archaeology and architecture, because we are at the epicentre for a very busy portal. Strange but possibly true, and again Bigelow and even the CIA could be aware of this. So are they preparing to release this information into the mainstream? The future. So the future, this soft disclosure is set to continue. The key organisations to watch will be To the Stars Academy, the New York Times, and Bigelow Aerospace. Investigator George Knapp has a very close relationship with Robert Bigelow, so he's definitely a researcher to follow closely in the coming year. Knapp advises Bigelow has confided a lot of confidential information to him. He intends to honour this confidentiality until instructed otherwise by Bigelow. There is chatter that Delonge may be set to release more material at some point in January of this year. He advises it will highlight credible negative threats to humanity. Nick Pope and others have considered the Rendlesham Forest close encounter, which occurred on a US Air Force base in England during the 1980s, could be part of an up-and-coming joint disclosure. There is speculation that the NSA took over the investigation of this incident. There are details of this case that not even the Ministry of Defence in the UK are privy to. This could work in parallel with the final release of the last remaining batch of UFO files from the UK government's MOD archive. For the well-established truth community, these disclosures have been very exciting, but also frustrating. An artificial line in the sand has been drawn at the tail end of 2017, defining the start of the long-awaited disclosure. Many feel this should have occurred 70 years ago. But whatever the reason for continuing disclosures, these are indeed exciting times. It's heartening at least to see that finally the mainstream has started to ponder one of the most profound questions of our universe. 2018 looks to be a defining year for the truth community.